Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. Today, we're going to be talking about getting a second meeting when you're in the federal market, you're knocking on doors, whether it's federal agency or teammates, you want to get a second meeting. That leads to everything. And so I'm going to talk to you about maybe why we're not getting it and how you can start getting second meetings. But before we do, I just wanted to mention a tip of the day for those of you showing up early and on time. Later in my training, I'm going to talk about a particular habit, and it comes from this book, The 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, which I will never stop recommending. It's my favorite all-time book, let alone business book and professional development book, et cetera. So inside of 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey talks about think win-win, and it's this habit of making sure everybody wins. And it's something I want you to keep in mind. And my tip is not where people sometimes think it would be, like where I think maybe you might say, I want to win and it's okay if they lose. I don't actually think that's a problem. I don't think people that are in my network, in my world, are selfish. I think sometimes what people in my world are is a little unfairly sacrificing on their own behalf. And so they're lose-win. They worry more about the other person winning than themselves winning. And my tip for you is whenever you're interacting with anybody, networking, et cetera, make sure there's this win-win approach that's going in. When you do, you will find that it ends towards this line that I love, giver's gain, right? This idea that everybody in our community is giving and we're all going to gain. So quick little tip. And remember, the book is called The 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. You cannot go wrong buying that book, especially getting an audio. It's great audio book because the narrative and the way they tell the stories is so much better. All right, so let me get rocking and rolling with today's training. So today we're going to be talking about why you're not getting second meetings in the federal market, right? There's a lot of different reasons that might be out there, but I think fundamentally I'm preaching to the choir when I say second meetings are vital. We all know that we want to have a first meeting that leads to a second meeting, et cetera. And in this particular case, right, in government contracting, we know that second meetings lead to relationships, and relationships are kind of the whole thing within federal government sales. If you've watched any of my training before, I talk about how having strategic relationships allows you to build teams, but it allows you to identify the slam dunk opportunities your company can win. It allows you to then write winning proposals because you got relationships, strategic relationships where people are talking with you. When you have those, you're going to have the success that you want. The problem is, for many of us, we're not getting the second meeting. We might be able to get the first meeting, right? We do outreach, we do some cold calling, we pick up the phone, we go to an event, we get cards, and we call people, and we have those first meetings, but they're not leading to second meetings. First meetings are not enough. They're great. They're a necessity. You must have a first meeting before you could ever have a second. But second meetings are where the rubber hits the road kind of thing, where the wheel of the car hits the road, right? That's when you're going to sit there and start seeing progress. And that's what I want to help you transform your first meetings into, these meetings that go from good to successful. A good meeting, or a great meeting even, is one where you go in, you do capability briefing, you have discussions around opportunities, whatever it is, you have a good conversation. Everybody likes everybody, but nothing comes from it. There's no follow-on. A successful meeting will move the sale forward. So a good meeting, everybody likes each other, but it pretty much is hard stop there. A successful meeting is one where the relationship moves forward, the opportunity moves forward, right? It doesn't have to be a close. You're not trying to sell, get the government to hand you cash in a meeting, for example, or to somebody to hand you a subcontract right away. But you're trying to move the relationship forward. And one of the clearest signs of a first meeting being a success is when you get a second meeting, either scheduled or committed to verbally, right? And so in today's training, I want to talk to you from 3 different angles as it relates to getting that second meeting. The first thing I want is just a reality check, why we aren't getting second meetings. I'm going to give you a couple of reasons that I see that people don't get second meetings, a couple of reasons that I've run into in the past and like why I don't get meetings, right? We can talk about that, but we face reality. And when we do face reality, it allows us to look at what we can do. And so that goes into the second 2 things I want to cover today is, what you can do before that first meeting and during that first meeting to ensure you get a second meeting. So the first meeting preparation and actually having that meeting. And then the second thing I want to wrap up at the end here is what to do after you have a first meeting. So if you have a first meeting, you feel like it was good or even successful, you feel like it was successful or just even good, what could you do afterwards? If you didn't get the second meeting in the first meeting, what could you do afterwards that kind of leads to that second meeting? Because it's not the end of the world if you didn't get it in the first meeting. You want to get it, but if you don't, I'm going to give you tips on how to move forward. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When you follow a process A to Z, you're going to have repeatable, predictable results. That's what you want for your company, and that's why I do this training, because I want to help you get to that stage. Part of the process is letting other people know who you are, letting buyers know who you are. Put your company name into the chat and your core competency, 2 or 3 words that tell us about your company. I think it was yesterday or the day before at the most, so Tuesday or Monday in this week, we had buyer representatives in from the Navy who were engaged in the chat, right? Make sure they can see you. Don't put a whole big paragraph. Make it easy for them to see you. Give them thumbs up when they say something, but also with your peers who are in here, engage with them. This is your network. I do the training, but I also bring together a community that allows you to find people it makes sense with to take for offline conversations. So absolutely engage. Today is the 8th of November. So tomorrow, the 9th and 10th, we're doing live training every single day, right? And so tomorrow I'm going to be talking about how you can predict your success and what you should be looking at for that prediction. And then on Friday, I'm really speaking to those newer businesses on how to make $100,000 in the federal market, in federal government contracting. And I'm not talking to middleman or any of these weird things. I'm talking to service-based, professional services, IT service companies, companies that are looking to come in and begin to build up a legacy business. If that's you and you're not getting any traction yet, Friday you're really going to love, because I'm going to talk about how do you get that first 100,000. Forget about the million first, right? The first million. Let's start with how do you get that 100,000. Okay, I'm going to dive into today's training around why you might not be getting second meetings, and I just wanted to begin with a reality check of some of the reasons we might not be getting second meetings. And I say this softly, right? But maybe you're no fun in the first meeting. Maybe you're there and people just don't enjoy themselves. It's like, oh, that meeting just killed me. I don't know if you've ever been to a meeting like that, right? Or been to a presentation. Hopefully it hasn't ever been one of my trainings, right? But this idea of there was just no fun. I didn't enjoy it at all. Why would I want to submit myself to a second meeting? Right? You should be thinking about this. You don't need to be a comedian or some sort of heavily charismatic person or something, but knowing that you're having fun in there and that you're coming, I always say, just bring a smile. It doesn't have to be some big old smile. I occasionally pop a big smile, but mostly I'm just in there and I'm happy to be talking with you, right? And going with that is this idea that, are you an energy thief? I am not an energy thief. I never take energy out of a room. I either keep it equal or generally I try to increase the energy in the room, right? And when you think about yourself and you walk into a room, it is vital that if you can't increase the energy a little, then you at least need to maintain it. If the other person has this much energy, don't bring it down by having less energy. There's this line, fake it until you make it. And I always love how sometimes people don't like those type of lines, but they're thinking about it as if you're faking something, and you're really not. That's not the idea. The whole purpose of that phrase of fake it until you make it, when you think about energy and walking in, is say, for example, you don't have the energy. We all have a personal life that comes to work with us, right? And maybe something's going on in our personal life. Like literally right before I got in the training, I got a call from my wife and my 2 10-year-old sons, and they're arguing with each other, right? It's like, I'm like, okay, hey, let me play mediator. But it raises my anxiety. So when I come in here, though, like I don't need to bring that baggage, and you don't need to bring it as well. I'm not trying to say don't be empathetic and people don't want to be empathetic, but don't come in and just on a regular basis bring the energy down because you didn't take the time to, make sure you had the energy going in. And a good way to see that you might not be fun or you're bringing the energy down is if you talk too much in a meeting, right? If you're doing training like this, it makes sense that you should be doing the most talking. But when you go into a meeting, you're way more fun if you're listening. In fact, people begin to think that you and I are fascinating if all we do is listen, right? That Neil, he's super fascinating. Really? What'd he say? I don't know. He just pretty much listened the whole time, right? That's how I can be fascinating, is to just shut up and listen. But that's kind of the purpose of a meeting, right? So when you're in those first meetings, you want them to feel heard and understood. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so by taking the time to listen more than you talk, you will demonstrate to them that you do care. And that is part of what you can do to lead to that second meeting. The second reason, and maybe a little bit more specific one here to the tips I'm going to provide you today, is some of us make it the other person's responsibility to get that second meeting. You go in, you're having a meeting, maybe they'll tell us how they'd like to proceed, etc. I never do that. First off, because you're just leaving it up to luck. And what I say is take control, right? So this second bullet is about taking responsibility for getting a second meeting happening. When you take responsibility, saying, you know what, it's on me. I got to figure out how to make this happen. It doesn't mean I'm blaming myself. When I take control, it doesn't mean like I'm pushing them down and I'm barreling through the room. I'm just saying I'm taking control and responsibility to make sure the two of us get the most out of this relationship by having a second meeting. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to help you and me see that having a second meeting makes sense and then getting it on the books. So take control. Don't leave it up to somebody else. Don't walk in and go, well, if the government wants to meet with me a second time, they will. You know, if that large prime or the small business I met with, if they want to build teaming relationships, they'll tell me, and they'll tell me how, you know, we can work together. No, you need to figure that out. And I'll give you tips on this, but you need to figure it out. And then take control during that first meeting to drive the second meeting, to go towards getting that scheduled, et cetera. This third tip that I have on why you might not be getting second meetings is that you're not aligning your value proposition to their value proposition. You're not looking at this and understanding how we can come together in a win-win relationship. Like I said earlier, Stephen Covey talks about don't get into a win-lose relationship. Don't get into a lose-win relationship or a lose-lose. Get into a win-win. And a win-win is about understanding the value proposition in this particular case. What I mean by value proposition, and I always just laugh because when I had my own businesses and didn't have a whole lot of time to be heads down learning new stuff because I was busy working with my customers, I used to get confused by value proposition. I'm like, God, I wish somebody could explain it to me, blah, blah, blah. All value proposition means it's the answer to what's in it for me. So my value proposition to you, I can figure that out just by putting myself in your shoes, looking back and going, well, what's in it for me, Neil? And then I jump over here because I'm in this third person fun. I jump over here and I go, well, you know, here's the value I bring. I will give you training on what you're doing wrong. And then I will tell you what you can do to succeed. And you can go off and practice that right away to start seeing success. My value proposition is this, right? When you think about it, and then you want to make sure that you're thinking about it from their side. What's their value proposition to you? Win-win is about making sure you're thinking about it from their angle and yours. What value do they bring to you? So let me give you an example of something I did yesterday, which is absolutely perfect example for this. Yesterday, I made an introduction between two companies, and I'm going to call them TS Company and Florida Company. So I introduced this company, this TS company, to a Florida company, and I said to the TS company, Florida company is looking to get a top secret clearance. You've got facility clearance, you've got a lot of contracts on the TS side, right? Your value proposition to the Florida company is that you can perhaps help them, if it makes sense for you guys to connect, you can help them go down that path to get a top secret facility clearance. Perfect. There's the win for Florida, right? Now, TS understands the value proposition that they bring to the relationship is that they might be able to help the Florida company get a TS clearance. You flip it around, the TS company is in DOD, in SOCOM, a little bit in SOCOM, a lot of other places, but they're not in Florida. The Florida company is in Florida by SOCOM, and they have relationships with SOCOM, and they're more than willing to use their relationships to help TS company get further into SOCOM, to learn more, to meet more people. If I can open up the relationships, they say, I'll be happy to do that. So the value proposition of the Florida company to the TS company is we'll make introductions to SOCOM. What's in it for me if I meet with you, Florida company? Oh, I'll introduce you to SOCOM. What's in it for me, TS company, if we have this relationship in a second meeting? Well, I'll try to help you get a TS clearance. Those are clear value propositions. You don't have to have them that staggering. They can be smaller ones sometimes and bigger. You just figure that out. But every meeting you go into, that first meeting in particular, make sure you understand the value proposition of both sides, because then you can guide the other person and make sure they know how they can help you and how you can help them. All right. So one thing I wanted to mention, though, is we're talking about getting a second meeting. Sometimes when you go into a first meeting, you find out that a second meeting is not even necessary. Whoa, this is not going to work, right? I meet with a company and I'm IT and you're construction. I'm in DOD and you're in Department of Education. You know what? Let's be friends, but we don't need a second meeting, right? So it's okay to have a no meeting. The part we're trying to address is when you want that second meeting and it makes sense and you're not getting it. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into 2 sets of tips. I got 2 slides that'll cover down the rest of the training. And the first thing I want to talk about is what you can do during your first meeting prep and when you're in that first meeting to be able to increase the likelihood you'll get the second meeting. So the first one is using a call plan. I have a whole set of training that I do about a call plan, but basically a call plan is an agenda going into a meeting you're going to have. Literally, Gus, who's my colleague, and he was on a call this morning with a couple of customers, walking them through call plans for the meetings that we helped them set up. And they're going in and we prepped them and role played a little bit going into that. A call plan is kind of this agenda that lays out some key information. First off, your objective. When you go into a meeting, you always must have a meeting objective. In this case, I'm just going to say the objective is to get a second meeting, right? Forget about everything else. That's the objective. Another thing that it has on there, though, is the purpose. The idea of an objective is it's kind of secret. We keep it to ourselves. We say, hey, this is our measurement of success in that meeting. But then we have a purpose statement, and the purpose statement we share with the other person. We say, hey, the reason we're here is because I want to learn more about your company, and I want to be able to tell you more about my company. I want to learn about your agency and the department you're in, et cetera. And I want to be able to talk a little bit about our company, right? And what I want to encourage you, something you can do right here in step 2 is when you're explaining the purpose, and you should do this every single meeting you have. You can do it in various ways, but what I like to do at the start of every single meeting that I'm ever in is to say, hey, can we just agree on the purpose really quick? Let me tell you what I think the purpose is, and then you let me know if I need to make any changes or whether you want to add anything to it, right? And this is a way to get us all to agree right at the beginning that this is the purpose of the meeting. When you do that, the meeting will flow in the direction you want it to. When you don't, the meeting can go anywhere because you didn't determine a destination. You didn't say our destination is this. That's the purpose, right? Well, when I say the purpose statement in a second or in a first meeting in particular, and I'm trying to get a second, what I generally might say is something like, hey, the purpose of today's meeting from my perspective is I'd like to briefly introduce you to our company and some of the things we're doing in other agencies. And then I definitely would like to learn about your agency and where you guys are going, especially how I can dig further into the agency as I do my homework, right, and supporting you. And what I'm hoping is that comes out of this is that we determine it would make sense to have another meeting. And so if it makes sense, I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting before we wrap up the meeting. So we can decide that at the end, right? From a sales perspective, what I did is I just telegraphed very clearly, right? Imagine me telegraphing as a boxer that I'm going to punch you. And I don't mean to, but really telegraph punch is like when every time I'm coming up here and I'm coming slowly and I'm just telegraphing that I'm swinging my punch this way. Well, in boxing, you don't want to telegraph your punches. But in sales, I tell people absolutely you want to telegraph because it helps communicate with the other person. What I'm looking for is to get a second meeting out of this. That's what I really think is a measure of success today. If that sounds all right with you, let's look at it at the end of the meeting. I'm also kind of pushing it to the end of the meeting. Why don't we both agree at the end whether it makes sense, right? And 99.9999% of the time, the other person's going to say, no, that sounds perfect. In fact, I rarely get anybody change the purpose because if you prepared properly for a meeting, then you got a pretty good purpose statement right there. So in the call plan, it has that purpose statement, and you want to be able to say that. That's a second tip for how you can begin to get the meeting is telegraph early on at the very beginning of the meeting that you want to have a second meeting. The third tip that I have for you is get one or more action items for them, from them. So what I always say is when you're meeting with somebody, and I don't care who you're meeting with, you want them to tell you to do something. That is my goal in a meeting in the beginning of a relationship because I want to build trust. And the quickest way I can build trust, personal trust, is to be able to do what you say. Wow, I just told Neil to do this thing and he went off and did it. Maybe I'll tell him 2 more things. And the cool thing about that is every time you do something, they'll give you something harder to do. And at some point they might say, hey, go meet with our CTO. Here's their email and phone number or something. It's like, all right, now we're getting somewhere. We small businesses sometimes, rightfully so, get a little frustrated when we keep getting told to do the same basic things. Like, hey, go make sure you're in our supplier portal. And what I tell my customers is when somebody says that, go, oh, perfect. Thanks for that. Let me write it down. Even though they registered in the supplier portal beforehand, because that's the smart thing to do. Don't say that you're in there. Instead, say, thanks for that tip and go away. Clearly, if they told you to register in there, they did not see that you're in there. So you might as well just get credit for getting yourself in there. Action items, though, the cool thing about it is you can use them to follow up. And I'll talk about this in the next slide. But when you get action items from people and you follow up on the action items, it really motivates them more to have a second meeting with you or to even talk to you again than if they gave you suggestions to do something and you didn't do it. It's like, well, why should I talk to you? I get people who do that with me all the time, who they're in the community and I give them tips and then they come back and ask for more advice, but they didn't do the first advice. DSBS is my classic example, right? I tell you to fill it out. If I tell you to fill it out and you come and ask me for something else, but I noticed that you did not fill it out, why would I want to give you more information? Why would I engage with you anymore? But if I say, hey, go fill out DSBS, and you come back and say, I filled out DSBS, I'm like, what can I tell you next? Because now I'm motivated to help you and to participate in the relationship. All right, number 4, it's pretty straightforward, but just ask permission to connect on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm on LinkedIn. A lot of people on LinkedIn these days. Do you mind if I connect with you on LinkedIn so I can just stay connected? And really, they'll tell you whatever. It doesn't matter. But what you want in number 4 is to ask permission, because they may sit there and say, oh, I'm not really on there. That's cool. Do you mind if I connect in case you ever do get on there? Oh, yeah, I am on there. Go ahead and connect. Send me a connection request. Whatever happens in number 4, nobody is going to say no. The worst they will say is, I don't have an account. And you go, okay, that's cool. Right? Maybe you should think about getting an account. But, asking that about connecting means I want to connect on LinkedIn because I want us to be connected and begin to build a longer term relationship. I'm not here to get information and get out. I'm here to build a relationship. Number 5, right? Ask permission. This is a great little sales tip, is ask permission to follow up. Do you mind if I follow up? And you can ask this question. Number 5, by the way, getting permission. You can ask this several times, 2-3 times throughout your meeting. When you have something you're talking about or they're saying something, you could say, hey, if I go off and I look at, additive manufacturing, because that's in my head at the moment. If I go look at additive manufacturing, I'm looking at some of the stuff and I get a follow-up question or question for clarification. Do you mind if I just pick up the phone and call you really quick and try to get a quick answer? Sure, go ahead. Like, no one is ever going to say no, but what you're doing is getting them to give you permission. And then when you write a thank you note or some meeting minutes, you can drop that in. Hey, I really appreciate the fact that I can follow back up if I got another question. I'm confirming in the email that you gave me permission to follow back up. We are establishing a relationship, whether you know it or not. And my job is to make sure we get to that relationship stage, right? Number 6, the last thing for things you can do in that first meeting is just ask them what events they go to, what they attend during the year to stay in touch with industry, or, if they're teaming partners, which events do they go? And what you want to try to do is to be able to follow back up and say, hey, I tried to find that event. I wasn't able to. Do you have a link or something you can send me? When you ask them about this, you're letting them know that I care enough about this relationship that I want to learn what events you care about and invest your money in to go to, the conferences you go to, so I can either attend it or I can learn from what's going on in there, right? You're communicating to the buyer or the person you're trying to build a relationship with, that I really want to understand what's important to you so it can then become important to me. So you had the first meeting, and in there's all sorts of opportunities and tips I gave you for how you can land a second meeting. Afterwards, right, say you didn't get it, and that's fine. You're coming out. Here's what I want you to do to increase the likelihood of you getting a second meeting when you ask for it next. Right. So the first thing is just understanding some of the process of follow-up. You want to send a thank you email the same day that you meet somebody and have that meeting, right? But nothing should be in that email except for a thank you. Jane, just wanted to send a quick note. Thank you for meeting with me. I know your time's. I know you got a lot of things on your schedule. I really appreciate you taking the time. Right. And you can make it shorter or that long. That was long. Make it shorter or longer. But all I said was thank you, and I ended. This is very valuable for 2 reasons, right? It's good, just proper professional respect to say thanks for the meeting. It's good to send it kind of fairly quickly after a meeting, but also it's part of your marketing engagement. People begin to get to know, like, and trust you after they engage with you over a period of 7 hours. They just met with you for 30 minutes or an hour. They engaged with you a little bit beforehand as they were setting up the meeting. And then afterwards, you're trying to keep them engaging. You're trying to get them to the 7-hour mark of one way or another, them interacting with you, because that puts you solidly in their mind. So when you say thank you, it's a marketing engagement or touch, right? So you've engaged with them that day you had the meeting with a thank you. The next day you send meeting minutes, and I call it a meeting summary, but you can think about it meeting minutes. It doesn't have to be overly formal. Hey Jane, I just want to jot down a little bit of what we talked about and what I heard to make sure that I got it correctly. I heard from you correctly. And then you sit there a little bit below. You say, hey, here's the action items that I wrote down. I appreciate you giving me some guidance. Here's the action items I wrote down. And 1, 2, 3. You want to try to have at least 3, even if they're simple, like go register here or something, or send me the capability statement. By the way, you're just saying a little recap of the meeting the next day, but you're not doing anything yet. And then, and this is all going towards engagement. They're like, wow, these people follow up with the thank you, now the meeting minutes. And the next thing you do is, let's say they said, send me a capability statement. You follow back up and say, hey, another day, like you wait another day or something. And you say, hey, here's the capability statement. I just want to take a minute and make it a little bit more unique to your agency or what we talked about, right? So here it is. And you're sending it separate. And so in that summary, you're telling them that you're going to follow up on the action items. And then you do follow up on the action items, right? You execute on all of these. And that might take a couple of weeks, but you're engaging with them. Remember, you're not trying to, the government contracting space is not transactional. We're not trying to say, here's the money, give me the thing, right? Even if it's the relationship, we're not trying to do this. We're trying to, it's a marathon kind of thing. You're working it through. So it's okay if it takes, weeks to get that follow up. But imagine how valuable these relationships that you're building will be when you've taken the time to build them into strategic relationships, right? Not just networking and people I've met once or twice and I know, right? These are strategic relationships that will lead to opportunities, enabling you to write the best winning proposals so that you can hit your sales goals. Well, that comes from doing things like executing and following up on these action items one at a time in there and engaging back with them, reaching back out and saying, hey, I just did this thing you said. Do you mind if we jump on the phone for 10, 15 minutes so I can talk to you about it? These all become reasons for you to get that second meeting, right? And the second leads to third and fourth and fifth. The other one was connect and engage on LinkedIn. So we already asked permission. So here you're engaging and asking for sending the connection request. And the last thing is something you can do after a second meeting is just follow up and ask them for a favor or a quick question. Hey, can you answer this question? Do you mind doing me this favor? I'm trying to figure out the org chart. What are the 2 departments that are under this group or something? And those are kind of the same. Can you make an introduction begins to slide into a favor? When you ask these little things, you make them so easy for them to do and to execute on, but then they're kind of basically investing in the relationship with you. No, absolutely. How can I help you, right? And so I might reach out and say, I know there's a data strategic plan. Could you get me a copy of that, right? That's a little favor, and they might be able to just turn here, get it, and give it to you. There was a briefing. I didn't get the slides. Could you get me a copy of it? Any of those kind of things, you just find it. You find reasons to engage with the people you want to build a relationship with. Here's what I want you to remember from today's training. First thing is, it's almost always the process if you're not getting a second meeting, right? Sometimes it's you. Sometimes you might not be fun or you're losing the energy. Fix that. But usually it's the process, right? Look at those tips I gave you for the first and second meeting, or the first meeting and then the follow-up activity. Look at that, and you're good to go. The second thing I want you to remember is just always ask for the second meeting. Right from the beginning of the first meeting, you're asking for a second meeting. Not pestering, right? But you're just strategically guiding them to, hey, let's schedule another meeting. And this goes to the last tip there is be persistent, right? You don't want to be annoying, but definitely follow up. And there's easy ways to follow up, like I described on how to follow up after a meeting. That's persistence. Just don't give up. If you just keep following up, and there's a reason, right? You've established a value proposition for both of you, then you will get that second meeting. This stuff I'm teaching you is exactly what I do when I help my customers and what I teach my team when they're helping our customers. It's the exact steps. I don't have something secret when I work with customers. I share the process and the tips right here. So follow it and you're going to have success. If you're interested in working with us and having us do this for you, just reach out on govconchamber.com. You'll find information and learn more about how you can work with us. And as you move forward, just remember in all of this, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.